Show. Innovate, connect, and bloom.
Welcome to the Bloom Show. I am your host, Saeed Naheem, and this show is brought to you by Above All Flowers and New Bloom Solutions. This show, if you are a florist in the floral industry, a floral professional, a wholesaler, a vendor, etc., this is the show for you. You will learn about Mother's Day trends, consumer behaviors, and much more from a flower industry research expert, Thomas Prince of Prince & Prince. So make sure to tune in, subscribe, press the little key, and stay for the rest of the show. So Thomas Prince, just like before Valentine's Day, took over the entire show. So at this point, you won't see me anymore. You'll only see Thomas Prince. At the end, I'll jump in to ask any questions that I might have, and I encourage the audience to also ask questions. This show, the Bloom Show, is for the floral community, by the floral community. So jump in, ask questions, share this with your customers for insight and to add value to them as well. And just tune in, subscribe and like, comment, and join. Have fun, enjoy your time. So again, without further ado, I'm going to invite Mr. Thomas Prince onto the show for the Mother's Day Trends Report.
The Bloom Show. Innovate, connect, and bloom.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Bloom Show. My name is Thomas Prince, and welcome to the world of floral market research. Today we're going to be going through some research that we've conducted over the last 20 years on consumer floral purchasing trends. And I have a presentation here to share with you today, consumer floral purchasing for Mother's Day. We're going to be looking at historical trends and the 2024 market projection. Much of this research is based on studies that we've conducted here at Prince & Prince basically since 1996 was our first study of consumer floral buying households. We did a national survey of over 1,000 households, and we continued it again in 2000, 2007, 2010, 13, and our last was right before COVID in 2019. So without any further ado, let's get to the study. Our objectives today are to gain an understanding of historical consumer floral purchasing trends for the Mother's Day holiday. Another objective is to understand how Mother's Day floral purchasing, how those trends vary by key consumer demographics and product usage. And today we're going to be looking at a few key demographics that we did for Valentine's Day: the consumer age demographic, educational attainment, as well as floral product usage. We're also going to try to understand the importance of Mother's Day and helping to build the floral market by examining Mother's Day purchasing correlations with other floral occasions. That is, how does a purchase for Mother's Day influence purchases throughout the year, other floral purchases? So we're going to be interested in that. I'm really interested in looking at how the interrelationships of purchasing of one category of floral might influence other categories of floral purchasing. So I'm really looking to get more interested in understanding how the consumer behavior of buying floral. If I could go back to the prior slide, please. I need to finish up. I know we do have a lot to cover today, but we have to go one slide at a time. From PMP's historical consumer household purchasing trend data and census data, we're going to make a market projection for Mother's Day 2024. And overall, we're going to discuss the implications of these consumer market trends on floral marketing and business strategies so that you can all have a more successful Mother's Day holiday. Next slide, please. Let's look at our research framework. Our consumer floral purchasing data is from, in this report today, Prince & Prince nationwide surveys of floral buying only in the years 2000, 2007, 13, and 19. And the reason we did this was more from a statistical standpoint. We want to have about equal distance of years between the studies for some of our analytics. And here we have 2000 and 2007 is 7 years apart. Then we have a 6-year difference between our 2007 and our 2013 study, and then another 6-year difference to our 2019 survey. And again, all of this data is from the Princeton Prince U.S. Consumer Floral Tracking Survey. This is a survey of over 1,000 randomly selected floral buying households throughout the United States. So these are all floral buying households that respond to our survey. Each survey comprises a random selection of over 1,000 households. It does give us a 3% sampling error for each study, but of course, across all the studies, we have over 5,000 respondents. So our sampling error actually declines closer to around 2% over the 5,000 respondents for across all the studies. The 4-page survey, it's a little survey booklet, captures over 100 metrics on floral purchasing behavior. We assess what the consumers buy, where they purchase their floral product, when they buy, for what reasons they buy, and how much they spend on fresh cut flowers and indoor potted plants. Next slide, please. The survey methodology does comprise a mailed survey for our early studies in 2000, 2007, and 13. And we did a mixed mode survey, bringing together both a mailed survey and an internet-based survey for our 2019 study. And as I discussed in our prior presentation for Valentine's Day, we did that because our research indicated that the mailed survey was becoming somewhat biased towards an older demographic. And we've been following the research of Don Dillman at Washington State University. He's been conducting and studying survey research methodology for almost 50 years now. And he found that the best survey to do was to pull together both an internet-based survey and a mailed survey. Those two types of survey methodologies have biases that go in the opposite direction. Mailed surveys tend to be more biased towards an older demographic, whereas internet-based surveys tend to be biased towards a younger demographic. And by combining the two, you can ameliorate that bias. And we do that with our studies in 2019 and any study going forward. We define floral as fresh cut flowers, fresh arrangements, bouquets, single stems, bunches, and corsages, and indoor potted flowering and foliage plants and planters. And for this reporting today, our survey metric of interest is the household incidence of floral purchase for Mother's Day. And we just measure this as simply yes or no in the survey. Did you purchase for this holiday floral product? And we describe what floral product is. Or did you not purchase for this past year? And so that's our metric today. And we capture that across the 1,000+ households in our study. The purchasing metric is computed as the percentage of floral buying households that make at least one floral purchase for Mother's Day for the year surveyed. Okay, next slide, please. I thought I'd show you in the survey, here are all the holidays, events, and occasions of floral purchase that we capture in the survey. We have 24 holidays and events, occasions of possible floral purchase. We've covered Valentine's Day in our last presentation. Today we're going to cover Mother's Day. So we have 22 other holidays and events. So we have possibly 22 more presentations to make. But I have some ideas of how we might bring that number down. We might look at groups or correlated groups of holidays, events, and occasions. But it is a rather comprehensive listing of floral purchasing occasions. And that really helps us understand the depth of floral purchasing by the consumer household. Next slide, please. Before we go in, we're going to briefly cover industry size and scope. We covered a little bit more detail in our last presentation. So if you're interested in more of this, go back to the Valentine's Day presentation. I also, at the end of this presentation, have some additional resources. You can get a little bit more information about the industry background, size, and scope. Next slide, please. I'm just going to say that basically here's from our survey data, we were able to estimate the size of the U.S. consumer floral market from 2000 to 2019. And I'm just going to cover the overall. We have breakdowns by cut flowers and indoor potted plants. I go into more detail in our last presentation, but just suffice to say, we went from 14 billion about in the year 2000. It was almost to 15 billion in 2007. Then we had the 2008 recession. Didn't change much until 2013. We got to 15 billion. There was a drop. We did a study in 2010. The market did drop, and I have more to that in one of the write-ups I did on the industry, and you can find it there. And then we went to 2019, and there was growth there. And after 2013 to 2019. And our projection, we did make a projection for 2025, almost $25 billion if we take that trend line, that quadratic trend line forward. So we're looking at $25 billion floral market total for 2025. Next slide, please. So the U.S. floral market grew from just over 14 billion in 2000 to nearly 19 billion in 2019, with a projection of nearly $25 billion by 2025. And this is consumer retail value. This is the total value of the floral product with all the amenities, all the upgrades, possibly delivery charges and any additional fees. So it's what the consumer purchase dollars are, not what the grower grew and the value of the grower or what the wholesaler sold for, but these are the consumer purchase dollars. The consumer floral market has generally shown continued growth from 2013 through 2019, and we do expect continued growth to 2025. Again, unless there's a possible recession or possibly another pandemic. Next slide, please. So there's some key questions that come from this. Are the recent floral growth rates of 4 to 5% annually through 2013 to 2019, are they sustainable in the near term? We have to think about that. And what role does Mother's Day have in determining overall floral industry growth? And we'll show you today it's quite prominent. Another question would be, can or should Mother's Day continue to be a major driver of sales growth for the industry? I know there's a lot of discussion in the industry that if we're focusing too much on holiday sales, or whether we should spend more effort on non-holiday sales and everyday floral purchasing. So that's a debate, but I think it would be difficult to imagine, what if we didn't have a Mother's Day? What if Mother's Day didn't exist? Such a prominent floral sales day for the industry. So I think we have to understand that there's a great importance to Mother's Day, and I'll show it today in some of the data of how it influences floral purchasing for other holidays, which is even somewhat different than Valentine's Day. And I'll show those trends. Next slide, please. So let's look at the household incidence of floral purchasing. Look at the top 5 floral categories. Next slide, please. I showed this again last slide, last time we did our Valentine's Day presentation. Although I think if you look back there, the number for Mother's Day, which is at 59%, birthdays were at 60%. Of course, birthdays occur throughout the year. Mother's Day 59, Valentine's Day at 49%, funeral sympathy at 37, and home decor at 36. We did have Mother's Day slightly lower in the last slide, and I thought, oh, well, why was that? And I went back and I go, oh, that was really our projection for 2024 that I had in the data slide. So this is the correct data for 2019, 59%, almost as much as birthdays. So it is a very, very important holiday, the most important holiday, single day holiday for the floral industry. So this indicates that of floral buying households, nearly 60% purchase for Mother's Day, which is a phenomenal number. So this is why Mother's Day is such an important holiday, and it's clearly 10% higher than that of Valentine's Day, which is a big number in itself. Next slide, please. So nearly 60% of all floral buying households throughout the U.S. purchased floral product for Mother's Day in 2019. Mother's Day is the most important single day or single week holiday for the U.S. floral industry. Of the top 5 floral categories of usage by consumer households, Mother's Day ranks a close second behind floral purchasing for birthdays, and those occur throughout the year. Next slide, please. With Mother's Day currently being the most important floral holiday for the industry, is there possibly more sales opportunity for this floral holiday? Interesting. Some indicate that they're topped out for Mother's Day, but it looks like for some demographic groups, there's more sales opportunity for this holiday. I would also like to ask a question of, does the floral industry take Mother's Day holiday for granted? Do we tend not to promote it or tend not to think of its importance enough so that we can actually maximize our floral sales for this holiday? And the floral industry likely needs to continue to embrace the importance of Mother's Day and understand that, like Valentine's Day, Mother's Day purchases may likely lead to more consumer floral purchasing throughout the year. So you don't just think of it as Mother's Day sales, but think of that sale as actually a promotional vehicle for sales of floral product at other times, other occasions, other events throughout the year. So Mother's Day, because of its broad usage, becomes a great vehicle for promoting floral product for other holidays. Next slide, please. So let's look at the trend in household incidence of floral purchase for Mother's Day over our study years. Here's the household incidence of floral purchase for Mother's Day across the 4 major survey years from 2000 to 2019. You see in 2000, 60% of floral buying households purchased for Mother's Day. Slightly higher in 2007. Again, market was pretty strong there right before the Great Recession in 2008. And it was reflected with a higher percentage of floral purchasing for Mother's Day at 63%. Then, of course, the recession in 2008 occurred. And we did show data for that of a drop in our 2010 study. And then by 2013, we really hadn't totally recovered, but we were back to 61%. But then we did our 2019 study. We said, oh, it's dropping slightly again, 59%. So it looks like there's been a slight trail off in household incidence of purchasing for Mother's Day. Next slide, please. And when we did a statistical analysis, next slide, please. When we did a statistical analysis of this and tried to fit the best fit line, it's not linear, it's quadratic. We showed it increased and then it declined, and it looks like the decline might be continuing to deepen. So this is a concern now that I'm looking at the data. We've only got a 4% difference from the high to the low, 63 to 59. But the quadratic trend, if that continues, is worrisome to some extent. And this trend line was significant at the 90% confidence level. So it does suggest that there might be a slight incidence of decline in floral purchasing for this holiday. Now, the industry, of course, doesn't feel it because countering this is the increasing number of households in the United States. And so this slight decline in the incidence of purchase is probably overwhelmed by the increased number of households that are occurring over the time periods. Next slide, please. And here I've shown that. Here's the number of households in the US, and of course, a portion of them are floral buying households. And so we see that from, in 2000, we had about 105 million households. It increased to 116 million by 2007, 123 million by 2013, and 128 million by 2019. And now I believe now it's, I think around 133 or 134 million households here in 2024. So, the household numbers keep increasing by about 1% a year. And so that obliterates the slight decline in incidence of purchase. But it's important to know that incidence of purchase is declining, even though we as an industry don't feel it in total sales because of the increase of population and increase of households and increase in number of floral buyers. But the incidence of actual purchase has been declining. And I think that's a trend we need to keep looking at to see if that continues into the future. And we'll know that with our if we get funding for our 2024 survey, we'll know whether that trend line is going to continue or whether it's going to ameliorate. Next slide. So since 2007, there has been a slight decline in the household incidence of floral purchase for Mother's Day, from 63% in 2007, that was a peak, to 59% currently in 2019. So that was a 4 percentage point decline over 12 years. The quadratic declining trend line in consumer floral purchasing for Mother's Day from 2000 to 2019 is statistically significant at 90% confidence level, suggesting that the slight decline is projected to continue and to become worse. So that's what my concern is maybe not now, but in the next time we do the study, if that trend line continues to decline, then we have something to worry about, I think. Next slide, please. The slight decline in household incidence of floral purchase for Mother's Day is likely not felt by the floral industry, as the number of households in the U.S. continues to expand at a higher rate, about 1% annually, compared to the decline in household purchase incidence, about 1/3 of 1% annually. So the increase obliterates the decline. Since the incidence of floral purchase for Mother's Day is currently high and relatively stable, the growth in floral sales for Mother's Day will likely continue in the near term as long as the number of households in the U.S. continues to rise. And we made that same statement about Valentine's Day. Although with Valentine's Day, I believe the decline was linear. Here it's quadratic, so that's a little bit more concerning. It means it's going to decrease at an increasing rate. Next slide, please. So what's population going to do in the future? Well, I showed a slide last time for Valentine's Day, and I've got a more updated slide from the Brookings Institute where they took it out to a longer period of time. They looked up over the next 80 years what the impact of population growth in the U.S. And they looked at it by immigration scenarios. And you can look at the historical line of what our historical immigration policy has been over the years. And we see that population increases till around 2080. And then it kind of flatlines before it declines on the historical trend line. If we look at a lower immigration policy, which is being proposed by some policymakers, we see that the population of the U.S. likely will increase to around almost 350 million around 2040, and then decline if those policies are enacted. And of course, zero immigration, that's generally not going to happen. But that would be just if there was absolutely no immigration whatsoever. You can see that basically in the next few years or so, we'd see population declining because the number of deaths of the U.S. population due to the aging of America would outnumber the number of births that are occurring. And so you can see how that would really, if we had zero immigration, which is unlikely to happen, would really have an impact in lowering population. And then look at the high immigration. If we relaxed immigration policies from where they are now, you can see that our population would keep on increasing. Even into 2100, there's still an increasing in the population. So that's a scenario where we even after 80 years we wouldn't still see a decline in population. Next slide, please. So let's look at floral purchasing for Mother's Day by specific consumer demographics. And we're going to look at consumer age, educational attainment, and annual floral spending. These are the same demographics we looked at for our Valentine's Day study. And I kept them the same so we could look at maybe compare some trends of how purchasing for Mother's Day, how it compares with purchasing for Valentine's Day. And so we were looking at these same trends. So let's look at consumer age. Next slide. Here's our household purchase incidence of floral purchasing for Mother's Day by age group across 2000 to 2019 surveys. And you see we have different trend lines for the different age groups. The green line is under 35. The red line is 35 to 44. The orange line is 45 to 54 age. The blue line is 55 to 64. And the shocking pink line is 65 and older. And then I drew in the average of all those is the average survey average is the black line. And you can see what happens there was that the under 35 basically started out close to 70%, dropped a little bit, and then went increased from 2007 to 2007, increased and maintained that high level of purchasing for Mother's Day to the point where it's around 74%, I believe. So that's the highest purchase incident for Mother's Day of any group is the under 35. So and that's been consistent since 2013. So the younger floral buyers under 35 have the highest instance of floral purchase for Mother's Day. That's a high number. And the fact that 74%, I mean, I have to look back to see if there's any other holiday event and occasion where that percentage is so high, but that's got to be one of the highest percentage instance of floral purchasing. So those young floral buyers are key buyers for floral product for Mother's Day. We look at the red bar where it went high to around 2013, and then it dropped off significantly to the average in 2019. We look at the 45 to 54 age group, and you see that it was around 60%. It went up in 2007, came down a little bit by 2013, but then started a trend up again. And they're at 67%, the second highest age group, or the second highest purchasing group for Mother's Day. And then we look at the blue line. That's the 55 to 64. They were under the survey average to start with, and they moved up to around the survey average by 2019. But then look at the 65 and older group. Really the lowest purchasers of floral product for Mother's Day traditionally, somewhere less than 50, 48%, 47%, 48%. Or is it 46? I can't read from my screen here. I guess I need some better glasses, Tom. But they're basically the same to 2013. And then it started to increase. It started to increase from 2013 on. And we see in 2019, it's close to the survey average, or it's moving towards the survey average. And of course, that basically is the influence of the baby boomer population moving into that older age group. Baby boomers have traditionally been strong floral purchasers. And we see that evidenced here in Mother's Day purchasing. Next slide, please. What's doubly important is here, now we're going to look at some population trends. The surge in household growth has been driven by both younger households and also the older age group has a high incidence of household growth. So as I discussed this more in the Valentine's Day presentation, but what what the Census Bureau did is they made some adjustments and found that the younger age groups, they had to adjust over the survey years their estimates of household growth to indicate what's actually happening. And they found that they had to increase the adjustments, increase the growth rates of the younger aged households. And you see the older age households, the red bar, they already have a high household growth rate. So this, like in our Valentine's Day, the two dynamics are we have household growth increasing for the the millennials, as well as the baby boomer generation. They have a high level of household growth now, and the baby boomers are increasing in households. So add that dynamic to the purchasing incidents, and you see why Mother's Day is so strong. Both groups have high household numbers or high growth in households, and they also have higher or increasing incidence of purchasing. So these are the dynamics that are driving the growth for Mother's Day floral sales. And especially now, if you think of increasing in household numbers for the millennials, as well as their high incidence of purchase at 74%, it really indicates that there's a lot of demand now for Mother's Day purchasing. So maybe the reason for the industry is saying we don't need to do so much is because the market trends are in our favor right now. We've got high household growth, high incidence of purchase of Mother's Day flowers. And so we're just letting the market dynamics create the demand for us. But so that's really some of the interesting underlying demographics that are driving the demand for flowers and plants for Mother's Day. So uh, let's go to the next slide. So the age group purchasing differences for Mother's Day that were once large in year 2000 are still quite substantial in 2019. And that's different than Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, we saw the trend lines all kind of converge lower, so that there was less differences in age differences in the purchasing instance. But we still see quite differences in age purchasing differences among the age groups for Mother's Day. So all the holidays don't react the same to demographics. Over time, the under 35 age group has consistently shown a strong purchase incidence for Mother's Day, and this age group attained the overall highest level of floral purchase incidence for Mother's Day in 2019, 74%. Since 2013, the 65 and older age group has made strong gains in purchase incidence for Mother's Day, went from 45% in 2013 to 54% in 2019, compared to other age groups. Next slide, please. So both age groups, the under 35 and the 65 and older, are not only large in size, but also have recently witnessed strong gains in household growth. That's the key dynamic. And like the P&P consumer findings for Valentine's Day, the purchasing strength for Mother's Day also is being fueled by both the youngest and the oldest age groups, largely the young millennials and the baby boomers, which currently represent the two largest generations in the US. Next slide. So there's your market dynamic for why Mother's Day is such an important holiday now. Given this market dynamic, a positive purchasing incidence in two key demographic segments, an effective marketing strategy for Mother's Day should likely target either or both consumer groups with specific consumer Mother's Day communication messages and appeals, and also age-appropriate floral offerings. And we discussed this with our Valentine's Day presentation. This dual market dynamic for Valentine's Day, or for Mother's Day, excuse me, may pose an additional challenge for floral retailers in achieving a successful Mother's Day holiday. And here we see that the purchasing incidence for the young millennials is really high, and the purchasing incidence for the baby boomers is increasing. So those two groups, opposite ends of the age group spectrum, So, and both of them are strongly buying for Mother's Day. So this is a real challenge, I think, for retailers, just like for Valentine's Day, a real challenge in how do you provide a floral offering, or how do you communicate a floral offering to such different age groups, uh, young millennials as well as baby boomers. So that's the challenge for Mother's Day, I think, for the industry, for the retailers. Trends in household incidents of floral purchase for Mother's Day. Let's look at by educational attainment. Next slide. Very few differences here. Very few differences among the three different age educational attainment groups. We looked at the high school or less, the green line. We also looked at those with both either a college or a technical degree. That's the red line. And then we also looked at those that had either graduate level or professional degree. Uh, that is the blue line. And if you look across there isn't much trend though, but what you do see is the high school or less started in 2000 with the lowest incidence of purchasing, probably under 60%, maybe 57%. And then they ended up in 2019 with the highest percentage, likely 63% or somewhere around there. So that's the key difference was the high school or less was lowest, and then they became the highest. But also look at the two more educated groups, the college and the grad professionals. Although these aren't big trends, these are small trends, they both tended to decline. The college educated and the graduate professional tended to decline somewhat their purchasing for Mother's Day. It's not big, but if that trend continues, that to me I think is worrisome. That the more educated consumers had less predilection to purchase for Mother's Day overall throughout the United States over time. Next slide, please. Historically, the level of educational attainment of the household has only had a small impact on the incidence of floral purchasing for Mother's Day. Since 2007, the college educated and the graduate professional degreed households have shown a slight decline in floral purchasing for Mother's Day. And I wonder, is this reasons for the overall quadratic decline trend line that we saw for overall purchasing? We saw that slight decline from 63% down to 59%. Is it the higher educational groups that are powering that decline? That's a question I have. I'll have to do more analysis to understand that. Since year 2000, only those households with a high school education or less showed a gain in floral purchasing for Mother's Day. Okay, next slide, please. So the key question is floral purchasing for Mother's Day losing some favor among the more highly educated US households? We need to think about that. In general, are the current floral offerings for Mother's Day somewhat lacking in sophistication for the more highly educated floral buyers? That is, what are the reasons why we see this slight decline in purchasing? You'd think it would go the other way, but apparently it's not. There's the more sophisticated, what you think would be the more sophisticated, more educated buyer has less of a predilection to purchase for Mother's Day. So we need to take a closer look at this. Be interesting to see if this trend does continue if we do our 2024 survey. But this is something I think we need to look into in more detail. Next slide. Let's look at the trend in household incidence of floral purchase for Mother's Day by looking at the floral spending levels, overall household spending for floral product. And this slide was also very interesting. So here's the incidence of purchase for Mother's Day by the various floral spending groups. And the lower spending group is $50 or less. That's the green line at the bottom. Then the red line, 50 to 100, the orange, 100 to 250, the blue from 250 to 500, And then the shocking pink line, those spending over $500 annually on floral product. And it's interesting to note, as we look at those various trend lines, we see if you look at the two lower trend, the minimal buyers, the green and the red line, those are minimal buyers. They don't do much. They go up a bit and then they come back down. And this was a little bit disappointing for me because in our Valentine's Day analysis, we showed that the minimal buyers had a greater predilection to purchase for Valentine's Day. And it brought us to the theory of Valentine's Day is bringing new buyers in the marketplace because of the minimal purchasers. Apparently, this data doesn't support that strongly. It indicates the minimum buyers are not generally making more purchases. They were up to 2013 and then it kind of dropped off a bit. So we don't see that upward trend line that we saw for Valentine's Day. In fact, almost all the trend lines from 2013 or even back to 2007 are trending slightly down for all the groups that spend under $500. The only group that really is increasing their buying are, look at that trend line for over 500. It starts pretty high, around 80% in 2000, maintains that to 2007, drops a bit, of course, during the Great Recession of 2008. But then since 2013, when that recession tended to end, they strongly started increasing their buying again. So the biggest floral buyers, those spending over $500 annually on floral, are really, really high buyers for Mother's Day. It's at like over 85% of floral buying households of the biggest buyers households are purchasing for Mother's Day. So it's a tremendously high number. So this really indicates that the big buyers are in the market for Mother's Day. I know floor shops know that, and they tend to cater to that group. But the biggest floral spenders are really, really in the market for Mother's Day. 85% of the biggest buyers have purchased for Mother's Day in 2019. And the trend line is increasing. That trend line is increasing. So that's an interesting story in itself. Next slide, please. Over the past 20 years, the biggest floral spending households based on annual floral spending have generally shown the highest incidence of floral purchase for Mother's Day. And for 2019, it was the highest, over 85%. Since 2013, the biggest floral spending households, spending over $500 annually, have been the only floral spending groups to increase their incidence of purchase for Mother's Day. That's pretty dramatic to know that only the biggest spenders have been increasing their numbers in purchasing for Mother's Day, and all the other groups have shown a slight decline in Mother's Day purchasing. Next slide. The more minimal floral buying, more floral spending households have recently witnessed a slight decline in purchase incidence for Mother's Day. And that's in striking contrast to the Valentine's Day floral purchasing trends. So we can't really say that that Mother's Day is bringing minimal buyers into the marketplace. And as it relates to the obligate purchasing theory, it could be that Mother's Day can be an obligate, considered an obligate floral purchasing day, but it's not among new buyers. It's basically obligate purchasing among largely existing buyers. So that would be the difference as it relates to the obligate purchasing theory. Next slide, please. The consumer purchasing trends by level of household floral spending does not suggest that the Mother's Day holiday is bringing new buyers into the floral market. The household floral spending trends for Mother's Day suggest that targeting the biggest floral spenders will likely be a successful strategy for Mother's Day. So, and this is what retail florists do. They identify the biggest floral spenders and likely promote sending email reminders and so forth for Mother's Day. But and so they understand that it's the biggest buyers are in the market for Mother's Day. Next slide. So let's look at correlations of household Mother's Day floral purchasing with purchasing of other floral occasions. We looked at this for Valentine's Day, and next slide. I have some interesting data where I make some comparisons about those. So we're going to give you a note about correlations. They do represent the level of association among two things, shown as a decimal number between -1, 0 indicates no association, and a +1 indicates a positive association between purchasing. Correlations of floral purchasing categories show how the purchasing of one floral category is associated with or influences the purchasing of another floral category, either positively or negatively. A high positive correlation among two floral categories shows as one floral category is purchased, the likelihood of purchase of the other floral category is high. When correlations are computed among data scored as 0, 1, which our data is, the highest or lowest correlation score obtainable is not -1, but somewhere around 0.67 or a -0.67. And this is due to the restriction of the data range. A lot of people that run statistics don't realize that when they have 0, 1 data and they run a correlation analysis and do the general Pearson product moment correlation, that some of the correlation numbers seem a little bit or biased downward because you can't really achieve a 1 correlation or a -1, so even among perfectly correlated variables. And that's due to the restrictions of the data range on 0, 1 data. Next slide, please. So let's look at our correlations of Mother's Day purchasing with floral purchasing for other occasions. And here I pulled together, made the chart smaller than our chart we used for Valentine's Day. And we just looked at the year 2000 and our earlier study and our latest study in 2019. And on that second column here for Mother's Day 2019, I highlighted and red outline the key occasions that have stronger correlations. And again, these are they're smaller than they should be, but they still, on a relative basis, they show which ones have the higher level of association correlation. So Mother's Day, the big ones are birthday gifting at 0.29 for 2019. Valentine's Day, it's 0.31. So Mother's Day and Valentine's Day are highly correlated. Get well gifting was interesting at 0.22, and also the funeral tribute at 0.16. So Mother's Day has an influence on birthday gifting, Valentine's Day, get well gifting, and funeral tribute. Now there could be others. I've only looked at these 10 holidays. Again, we survey over 24. So eventually I'll look at all of these different holidays, events, and occasions. But this gives some insight into what's happening with Mother's Day and how it influences other purchases throughout the year. And let's look at some the differences there between 2000. Actually, birthday gifting is down somewhat from what it was in year 2000. And Valentine's Day has been relatively the same, 0.31 in both year 2000 and in 2019. But look at get well gifting. It was weaker in 2000 at 0.13 and stronger in 2019 at 0.22. And the same goes with funeral tribute, more than doubled. So it's interesting how these relationships have changed over time, that a Mother's Day purchase tends to be associated with other floral purchasing occasions: Valentine's Day, get well gifting, and purchase for a funeral tribute. So there's some interesting discussion here of, Mother's Day isn't just for that holiday, it's for potential purchasing for other holidays, events, and occasions. Now, let's look over on the right of the table. We show what happened with Valentine's Day. And there you see birthday gifting also declined a bit with Valentine's Day purchase. But you look what happened there with get well gifting. It went in the opposite direction. It was a 0.19 for Valentine's Day and dropped to 0.11 in 2019. So Mother's Day picked up uh, uh, purchasing. Valentine's Day dropped in purchasing. And look, there was no difference on funeral tribute for Valentine's Day, but Mother's Day, it went up over time. So it's interesting to look at these associations and trends and seeing how things are changing over time. But it does indicate both Valentine's Day and Mother's Day have associations with purchasing for other occasions and holidays throughout the year. So this is why we should continue to support and continue to um, uh, embrace the importance of these holidays in our marketing and promotion, because they have extended their marketing to other occasions and events. And so it's beneficial that when we promote for Mother's Day and for Valentine's Day, we're actually helping achieve purchasing for some of these other categories. Next slide, please. Mother's Day floral purchasing shows greatest association for purchasing for birthdays, Valentine's Day, get well gifting, and funeral tributes. Of the 10 occasions selected for comparison, all 10 show positive purchasing correlation with Mother's Day in 2019 and in year 2000. So all of them showed, at least there was no negative correlations in any of these 10 that were selected. So it indicates that it's a winning situation. Note that for 2019, the Mother's Day purchasing associated with get well gifting and funeral tribute has increased substantially since year 2000, and this dynamic did not apply to Valentine's Day. So these holidays, events, and occasions do have some differing effects. So you can't just lump them all together and say, oh, they're all doing the same thing. No, each one has their different profile of how they affect purchasing of other categories. Next slide, please. The P&P consumer floral data reveals that Mother's Day is not only a key sales day for the floral industry, but also a key market builder for the industry for other key floral purchasing events and occasions. And they said the same thing about Valentine's Day. These big holidays purchasing.
Oh, he's
Oh,
back. Here you go.
okay, thank you. I wondered what happened there. I thought I was being sucked into a black hole. While Mother's Day floral purchasing may not be bringing new floral buyers into the market, it may be influencing obligate floral purchasing and floral gifting with existing floral buyers. So even though it's not associated with new floral purchasing, uh, it still could be associated with the obligate floral purchasing. And we did show it shows influence with get well gifting and with funeral tributes. Next slide, please. So let's look at our floral market projection for 2024. Again, here's how we do our projection. We get some key pieces of information and we put it together into a formula. We need the number of U.S. households in the United States, and we get that from census data. And we also look at some data from the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University that give us some refinements in that census data and make sometimes some growth projections that are very helpful in our analysis. We also have the participation rate, our participation rate, which is our studies are only about floral buyers. Every one of our surveys that were returned to us they're purchasing households. So we have to understand what percent of all buyers are floral buyers and what percent don't buy any floral. So we have to make estimates of that, and there's ways in which we do that here at Princeton Prince. We have various survey methods and survey bridging and calibration methods that we can do to estimate what the percentage of non-buyers are in the market, and we do that. So we do get our participation rate. Then we have our incidence of purchase for the specific holidays or for the specific products that we have in our survey, and so that comes from our survey data. And then we have the average dollar spending per household or the spending on a category or whatever. And again, we have that or can estimate that from our survey data. So we pull this all together, some various formulas and analysis, and we develop an estimate of purchasing for the holiday. So our next slide, please. And here's the trend in U.S. household incidence of purchase for Mother's Day. And then there's our projection for 2024. And you can see that it was 59% in 2019. And when we follow that quadratic trend line and get the equation for that line, we can then predict what it will be in 2024. And our prediction based on that quadratic trend line is it will drop to 55% in 2024. That's our year, this year. So that's why I'm concerned about that decline in floral purchasing on the incidence, that for 2024, our projection is it drops to 55%. So we use that in our calculation of the overall market size. Next slide, please. So here are our recent estimates of U.S. household floral purchasing for Mother's Day. This again, this is all the categories, all fresh cut flowers and indoor potted flowering and foliage plants. This is the total market value of floral as we define it for the United States. In 2019, it was $4.5 billion at retail. We didn't have an estimate for COVID in 2020 because COVID hit right before the Mother's Day holiday. And we didn't have an estimate in 2021 because I got COVID in 2021. Actually, I got it twice. It was pretty bad the first time, but I did have the shot, so I didn't have to go to the hospital. But I was pretty sick for about 3 months. So I wasn't able to make an estimate for 2021. I apologize for that. But then we were able to make an estimate for 2022, and that was when the market had rebounded, but also inflation was involved in that category, in that computation, and it was at 5.1 billion. We do have the consumer price index; these are adjusted. So we do take account inflation into our evaluation and our analysis. And for 2023, it was 5.2 billion. So it increased slightly. So we went through all the analysis and computations again, even though we had the decline in incidence of floral purchasing. Here's our projection for 2024. Next slide, please. And we see that in 2024, increased again slightly to $5.3 billion. That's our estimate for 2024, $5.3 billion in floral product purchasing for Mother's Day. That's all fresh cut flowers, indoor potted plants and foliage plants, all indoor. This does not include outdoor bedding or garden plants. This is $5.3 billion in what we call floral product, our definition of floral. $5.3 billion for 2024. And this is even though we had the lower incidence of purchase projection for 2024, we still had a higher projection for floral purchasing for Mother's Day at 5.3 billion. Next slide. So now we'd like to explore, if we have time, I'm not sure what the time limit is here. I believe we're over 2 o'clock, but we're going to explore our obligation floor purchasing theory a bit. Next slide. We had some discussion. You may go back to our Valentine's Day show and get a little bit more background on this. But we have a model of floor purchasing of, trying to understand, how does a consumer become a regular floral buyer or purchasing for oneself? And we came up with this adoption model of consumer floral purchasing. And it came from our work that we, back in the early millennial years, we analyzed data from the Flower Promotion Organization, the FPO ad campaign, which was an ad campaign by the industry, funded by Asako Flores and the California Cut Flower Commission, to ensure purchasing of floral, but basically focusing on self-purchasing of floral. And we came out of that indicating that, yes, the campaign was positive. It did have an influence on increasing consumer purchasing for floral. The biggest effect tended to be with the consumers under 50,000 in annual income at that time. Even though the campaign was targeted towards an upper end target, it really had the biggest impact with consumers with household incomes under 50,000 in income. But it did have a positive impact. But the amount of floral purchasing didn't meet the expectations of those in the funding group, so it wasn't continued. But I came out of that thinking, what could be done? Why didn't the messages work? Why didn't the advertising campaign have a better impact on the marketplace? And I thought, well, maybe we're approaching this problem in the wrong way. You just can't go out to a non-buyer and try to get them to purchase floral. Maybe there's a process that the non-buyer goes through to become a floral buyer. And my brother and I were looking at our data from what we were collecting at the time, indicating that there were some types of purchasing that the minimal buyers were doing, that they were involved in Valentine's Day purchasing, and that maybe there's something related to obligate purchasing, that a consumer feels somewhat obligated to buy, and that becomes an initiation for floral buying. So we came up with this model. We call it the adoption model of consumer floral purchasing, where you have obligate floral purchasing, where a consumer feels somewhat obligated to buy flowers. That could be for Valentine's Day, perhaps for Mother's Day, we thought. Could also be for a prom or dance, any holiday event or occasion where there's some type of obligation. And then that would relate to, if there was satisfaction with that purchase, it would then relate to purchasing a floral for gifts for others. And as they got involved with more and more purchasing of gifts for others, that would then turn to more purchasing of floral for oneself. So it's like this process model of becoming a floral buyer that starts with obligate floral purchasing, then expands to purchasing of floral as gifts for others, and then finally expands to floral purchasing of for oneself. So I thought, well, maybe we could test this model with some of the data that we've been collecting over time. And go to the next slide, please. And so I was looking at what did I know about all the coursework I've had in market research, and I thought, well, this is a key question for structured equation modeling, because structured equation modeling looks at networks and how one construct relates to another and relates to another in a whole network. And so I thought structured equation modeling should provide us a framework for understanding this model. And here's a simple description of it. I'm not going to go into detail for this analysis, but you have on one side, you have your collected market data, and you compute a covariance matrix of the metrics. And you may remember from your algebra, high school algebra, the covariance matrix has the variances of the variables on the diagonal, and the off diagonals, or the numbers that indicate how does that variable covary with other variables. And there's a lot of information contained in the covariance matrix. So that's your collected marketing data. And then on the other side, you have your structural theory. And this is various groups of equations that are to be solved for, and it identifies the parameters of the model. And so basically on one side, you have your structural model, the other side, you have your data. And mathematicians worked on this for decades to figure out, well, how can we develop these equations that could one equates to the other, so we can have an iterative process that would tend to come to a convergence where one equals the other. And then that would be your analysis. That would be your results of the data. And back in 1979, two Swedish mathematicians, statisticians, figured it out. And then later, Peter Bentler from UC Berkeley figured out his theory of structural equation modeling. He developed an EQS program. The first group had a Lisrel program. I first learned the analysis through Lisrel. And later there were other packages that came out. But it's called structured equation modeling, and we'll go through this. Next slide, please. So our theory, next slide. We're going to develop a structured equation model. We're going to be looking at obligate floral purchasing. We're going to call this model A, and that is that obligate floral purchasing, our theory is, has a positive influence, that's the arrow, positive influence on floral purchasing as gifts, and therefore that also has a positive influence on floral purchasing for oneself. So this is our model right now. Obligate purchasing leads to floral purchasing for gifts, and then that leads to floral purchasing for self. So here's our basic theory of our model. Next slide. Then we have to develop our metrics for each of those components. And this is what is considered our measurement model. So the obligate floral purchasing, we're saying, is composed of our survey data on Valentine's Day, Mother's Day. I also am looking at anniversary. I think anniversary would be an obligate floral purchasing, because usually anniversaries are maybe every 10 years or so, that they're important events. They would likely be considered maybe an obligate reason for purchasing floral. And then, of course, we talked about proms and dances as being one. So our theory is that obligate floral purchasing is composed of these four metrics that we've already captured. Now, another aspect of structured equation modeling is that we are allowed to estimate, or we're able to estimate, the error in each of these measurements. And that's an important aspect of the model, because of this model here, the obligate floral purchasing factor, it's actually inferred. It's not measured directly. Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, anniversary, and proms and dances, those are metrics that we directly measure. And we're able to estimate what the error is. People don't understand what's measurement error. They think, oh, well, this sampling error, 10% or 3% sampling error. No, measurement error is the actual error in the metric itself. Like whenever we do work in the laboratory, working at gas chromatograph, understanding how much ethylene is being produced by a group of roses or whatever, that machine gives us a certain level of error, maybe 4 or 5 parts per billion error. Anytime we use any kind of measurement device, there's always a certain level of error. When we have survey questions, each survey question, based on the wording, also has a level of error in it. Now, no one talks about it, no one understands it, because they just don't know how to measure it. But there is a ways of measuring the amount of error in a survey question. And so we pull that error out in our model. And so that obligate floral purchasing factor is actually theoretically measured without error. The error is in each of the measurements, but the factor itself doesn't have error. And I might note that the arrows there, obligate floral purchasing, goes to each of our metrics that we've measured. And the reason for that is the theory is that obligate floral purchasing exists in the marketplace. It's there. It's not directly measurable, but it's there, and it impacts each of our metrics. That is, it is manifest in our metric for Valentine's Day, our metric for Mother's Day, our metric for anniversary, and our metric for proms and dances. Obligate floral purchasing is manifest in each of those metrics. And so that's why the errors go to each of those metrics. So then we test this model with our 2019 survey data. Next slide, please. And we do the same thing for our obligate. Oh, here's the data. Yeah, here are the results. So when we ran this model, here's our data, and the data are the numbers there, and those are what we call our loadings, and that just indicates how strongly each of those metrics relate to that factor. So our obligate floral purchasing factor in this model, Valentine's Day has the biggest impact, 0.64, followed by Mother's Day. Anniversary also has a big impact, 0.61, and proms and dances much less so at 0.24. In fact, we might drop that from the model. I think the reason for that is that the proms and dances is actually a double-barreled question. You really shouldn't have double-barreled questions. It actually is. You shouldn't ask a question with with two answers to. Is it either proms or is it dances? We have it as both proms and dances, and so that's probably biasing that data. So that's why it has a lower loading, is because it's confused between proms and dances. So we may drop that in the future. Down below are some of the metrics we have to measure how well this model fits the data. Our chi-square, we actually want a low chi-square value. It runs opposite to when you do crosstabs, because in crosstabs, the higher your chi-square, the more relationship you have in the data. Here we're saying how well does the model fit the data, and so you want the chi-square to be smaller. You want it to be less, a small number, not a big number. And our discrepancy is actually your chi-square divided by the degrees of freedom. And so you want that to be low. You want it actually to be, for a simple model, to be under 5, and it is. It's 0.715. Our comparative fit index, you want to be close to 1, and it is. It's around 1. And another metric that's being used is the root mean square error of approximation. You want that to be close to 0, and it is. So this is a pretty good model. It could be better. The loadings could be higher. Generally, you want the loadings to be, a good loading is a 0.7, 0.8, 0.9. A moderate loading is a 0.5 or 0.6. A low loading is a 0.4, possibly a 0.3. So in this regard, I might drop the proms and dances from the model and just go with those first three. But also, we have to realize that we're dealing with 0-1 data, which is going to have a lowering effect on the loadings as well. So there's our obligate purchasing factor. Pretty good. Let's go to the next slide. Our floral purchasing as gifts. Similar methodology. We're looking at, I picked out coworker gift, get well gifting, thank you gift, and cheer up gift. These are all metrics in our survey that we're able to pull together. So we're indicating in this model that floral purchasing of gifts is manifest in these 4 different variables. And here's our error components that we're estimating. And we run the model from our data from 2019. Next slide, and here's our results. Oh, there we are. We see that the strongest ones were get well gifting and thank you gifting came in with the strongest loadings. Coworker gift was a little bit less. Cheer up gift close to 0.40. I don't show the data for the error components generally because they're usually small. It just makes it confusing to look at. But this model, pretty good. Chi-square a little bit higher. Our discrepancy should be under 5. It's at 3.9. Our comparative fit index should be close to 1, and it is 0.995. Our root mean square of approximation for simple models should be under 0.10, and it is. So this model is a pretty good fit. I would hope to have higher loadings, but again, we're dealing with 0, 1 data. But you might drop one of the lowest loading issues in the factor to get maybe a better fit model. But this looks pretty good so far. Doing a lot of reading on this, more and more of the researchers are saying they like to see models with more measured variables, even if they don't have the strongest higher loadings, because it makes a richer component that has multiple aspects of gifting. So, if we're looking at floral gifting, if you only kept the two highest loading, you'd say, well, it's just gift well and thank you. Well, but what about a coworker gift or a cheer up gift? So all these aspects of gifting with floral really make it the factor a richer factor. So that's why, in fact, even right now in the Journal of Marketing Research, you can't get a paper published unless your factor has at least 3 or 4 or 5 manifest variables. They don't want just a factor with 2 variables or even 3. They really want that you'd have more variables in your factors to get your paper published. Next slide, please. Okay. Then we're looking at our floor purchasing for self. And here we had limited data because they didn't have that many metrics to choose from the data that we already have. We have an issue on floor purchasing for myself. We also considered, well, home decoration. That could also be considered a self-purchase. Yes, you're using it for decorating your home, but you're enjoying it yourself while it's in the home. And then we also thought, well, maybe people working office decoration. Now, of course, 2019, this happened before COVID, so they weren't necessarily considering their home office because there was a lot more home offices that occurred after COVID. It almost doubled from some of the literature I've read. So this was before COVID. So we did get a lower loading on that. Maybe it'll be different after COVID because there's going to be more office usage, home office usage after COVID. Next slide, please. So here's our results for that when we pull in the data. Pretty strong. Purchasing for self 0.58. That's a good loading. Home decoration 0.59. That's also a good loading. Office decoration low, only 0.2. So for self, it's like office decoration is contributing very little. We may drop that issue, but then maybe after COVID, it may have a stronger loading to self purchasing. So that's something we'll have to see with the later data. Again, our chi-square is small. Discrepancy very small. Comparative fit index is good. Root mean square error is good. So this is a pretty strong component on purchasing for self. So what we've done here is first try to understand the model, and then we put it all together. So here's our model that we're looking at. Obligate floor purchasing, influencing floor purchasing for gifts, and then influencing floor purchasing for self. Of course, we have error coming in on the equations too, as well as error for all of our measurements. And when we run this data, now this is again with the Princeton 2019 data, here's what we get from the analysis for the results. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I have it in red, the two big things we're looking at. The impact on obligate floor purchasing to floor purchasing for gifts is 0.44, and for gifts to self-purchasing is 0.54. Now, what 0.44 means on obligate floor purchasing means for every unit change in obligate floor purchasing, we get a 0.44 increase in purchasing for gifts. And for every increase in purchasing for gifts by 1 point, we get a 0.54 increase in purchasing for self. So this is pretty strong. These are moderate driver scores, but they're pretty strong. 0.44 for one increase and obligate purchasing, we get a 0.44 increase in gifting. And for a unit increase in gifting, we get a 0.54 increase in self-purchase. So even with this data, now this is just cross-sectional data. It's not data over time. I'm sure if we had data over time, would be even stronger relationships. But this is pretty strong data that supports the obligate floor purchasing model. Again, if I can get data from other data sources, I will to test it. But this is pretty strong data to support. So next slide, please. This was from our 2019 data. I then went ahead and pulled data from all 4 studies, 2000, 2007, 2013, and 2019, and ran the model across all 4 study data, 4,322 respondents. And that data showed a similar findings, 0.41 on obligate purchasing to gifting, and stronger 0.52 on gifting to self-purchase. So again, not just for 2019, but across the past 20-year data, we're seeing a similar trend in this analysis, a similar trend in the obligate floor purchasing model. Now, again, this isn't the end all and be all, but it does give us some initial support that this model has some legs to it. And I'd like to refine it, pull in more data, perhaps data from other sources. But this is something that I'm really interested in. I'm interested in looking at further analysis. Next slide. That was our Model A, but we really have another model to test, and I didn't have time to do it yet. But I want to look at obligate floor purchasing, its impact on purchasing for gifts, but also its direct impact on purchasing for self. Now, it's important to note, if that line, that driver between obligate floor purchasing and purchasing for self is small, non-significant, or 0, that means that obligate floor purchasing is mediated by purchasing for gifts before you get to self-purchase. That's important to know. It's important to know that, if that's 0 or non-significant or a small number, it means that this model, that obligate floor purchasing, to get self-purchasing, you have to get gifting first before you go to self-purchase. So that will tell us a lot. It will tell us a lot about how we get to self-purchase. Do we have to get gifting first and then to self-purchase, or can we go directly from obligate to self-purchase? So this is going to be interesting to see how this model resolves itself and what the parameters are, because this is really, really important. Next slide, please. So we're going to do some additional model testing. We're going to test the model, obligate floor purchasing model A and B across consumer age groups, see if they change or if they're invariant across age groups, across income groups, and educational attainment groups. We're also going to look at the models for A and B across recessionary periods. We're going to look at year 2000 data when we had the recession, and non-recessionary periods, both 2000 and 2019. And we're also going to look at the testing of models A and B for specific consumer age groups, a cohort that is the same age group in year 2000, pull that same age group in year 2010, and that same age group in 2019. So it'll be those age groups that are getting older over time. And we'll test the model on that data to see if that has an influence. It's not like getting a data over time for each individual, but it is for different age groups. So we're looking at that same age group as it ages through our study. So that's going to be interesting to do. Next slide, please. Oh, that's the end of our presentation. I'd like to thank you for your attentiveness today. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me. There's a number there. You see me on the website, floralmarketresearch.com. And next slide. And I do have some additional resources. Again, the PMP U.S. Consumer Floral Tracking Survey, you can get information about that. Again, we're looking for co-sponsors for our 2024 survey. So if you have interest, send me an email, call. I can give you a lot of information about how to participate in the study, what it's going to cost, how many are going to participate in the study. There's some other resources there, information about the FPO ad campaign and our analysis of that ad campaign. And there's some additional resources for some other interests. If you want to understand some of the history of the industry, I wrote that article for LinkedIn Magazine, and I have the link there. So any questions or comments, I'm here. Thank you. I can't hear you, Saeed.
Thomas, thank you. A lot of information, a lot of information. So thank you to the audience that hung out for an hour and 25 minutes.
Oh,
I hope that the time goes by fast, Tom, when you're having fun, huh? But so thank you so much for everybody hanging out. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. But I do want to mention that Thomas is doing this. I know that a big portion of it is before 2019 and 2020. But the reason why we've collaborated to do this is because to educate on this information to hopefully encourage more research in the future. So please do reach out to Thomas Prince to find out how you could sponsor this event, this research, and help the floral industry. Thomas, do you want to share a little bit if someone does help facilitate and invest into this research? What is it a benefit for them to help support this?
well, for them, we give a 1-day presentation, and it's really tailored to that company. Like if it's a cut flower company, we basically just focus on the cut flower data we have from the study and do a lot more analysis for that and a lot more information. So we may break down all of our purchasing for fresh cut flowers, for individual categories of bouquets, arrangements, single stem, all the categories we have on cut flowers. We may go back and also look at all the breakdowns. We have 10 demographics that we break the data down into. So if you have, 5 categories and you're looking in depth at 10 demographics across 5 or 6 studies, you've got about 50 slides to cover just in that one demographic section. So you can go into a lot of detail for the client. And then we have our Q&A too during the presentation. So people are asking questions throughout the presentation. I remember we gave a presentation down in Miami to a Miami importer, and they brought their grower along. And we started that presentation at 9 o'clock. We went to dinner at 6, and we came back and finished it up at 10. So we were there the full day, giving the presentation, answering questions, and it was really great for the entire company and
Tom,
all their salespeople.
Sorry to cut you off, which is a little short on time. We took a bunch of time, but we're a little short on time. But when it comes to the sponsors, they sponsor and they have about 6 months to a year of having the information exclusive as well. Is that one of the benefits, or do I have that wrong?
They have a 1-year exclusivity. We do not publish any of the information for 1 year. And even after that 1 year, we only distribute the information to those that sponsor us to come in for a seminar. So it's not like it's a broad distribution whatsoever. It's only in the 2nd and 3rd year that we get broader distribution of the data. So they have 1 year exclusivity to pull together a marketing program, to take and see what changes they can make in their company from the findings. And so it's a real benefit. It's a real benefit. The companies that we've given the information to or presented to have really told us that they really thought it was very invaluable for them to have that information. And again, the overall project costs are split among the number of companies that sponsor the study. Uh, when we first did this, we only had like 5 or 6 sponsors each year, and we asked them, the sponsors, well, should we get more co-sponsors to reduce the investment? And they all said no.
They kept it
They
to
all said
themselves, right?
no. They
Yeah,
want the information themselves, and they don't want it to go elsewhere.
got it. Got
And
it.
we understand that, because market information it's competitive information largely. It helps them compete in the
Yes.
marketplace. And so what they know about the marketplace, others don't know. And it gives them a competitive advantage in the marketplace. So that's we have a saying here at Princeton Prince, is that if you have market information and you give it to everybody, it lowers the value of that information,
Understood.
because everyone knows, then the market response is diluted
Makes
because
sense.
it's available everywhere. So that's
So,
part of what marketing is it basically helps in developing the competitive strategy for a company, and it's what they know that other companies don't know about the marketplace.
Thomas, I appreciate your time. Truly appreciate the work that you put into this, and I hope and I look forward to having another one. We're planning to do this quarterly, so
Yep.
I believe the next one will be all the other demographics and holidays we were talking about, kind of grouped up, and then
Well,
we'll look at the
I'm
next year.
thinking about that, but I'm also thinking about, maybe since we have this issue with the uh, purchasing for self, I
Yeah,
might look at the purchasing for self
gotcha.
and do a whole expose on that.
So
Uh,
what I would recommend and encourage the audience to do is make a comment on which would you prefer, all the other small micro holidays or the purchasing for self. And I would say the purchasing for self, because that seems to be something that leads people to the purchasing for self. So I think that that's the chain that will keep on moving, and I could appreciate
right,
that very
right.
much. So Thomas, I'm sorry, you had one last thing to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say purchasing for self would also be great for the summer. For
If all year long, it would be almost another market, right?
right,
That's the
right,
beautiful thing of it. Not only will it be another market, there's great marketing potential from
right,
even farm level, creating sleeves that say buy one for you, one for me, or one for me, one for them. Deals and
right,
specials that mass markets and supermarkets could do. Florists could also do some coupons that you buy for Mother's Day and get one for
right,
yourself. Show me your card for your own birthday. There's so much marketing potential, but you have to believe in it and you have to take action. And even a
right,
wholesaler could take action by educating their florists on how to use this demographic or market to improve their sales. So, with those
right.
words, I really appreciate you, Thomas. Truly appreciate you. I'm running late for a call, so I'm going to say
Okay.
goodbye to everybody and put you in the bloom room, as we call it. Take care. Thank you,
All
Thomas.
right. Thank you.
Have a
Thank
great
you very
one.
much.
Bye bye. Again, thank you to the audience for hanging tough. And it was great information. So I know everybody got great value for it. And I really encourage everyone at all levels to think of this information. Sometimes we just look at it and say, oh, that's not for us. But think about it. If you're educating the supermarket, saying this is where the trends are going, you could create products based on those trends to offer to your mass market. Vice versa, you could also educate the wholesalers on how to educate the florists and educate the florists directly, so that that could increase consumption and floral purchases, which in turn would help all the entire supply chain and the entire value chain as well. So we do want to thank Thomas for joining us today. My partner chimed in real quick. Let me see if he chimed in again. Purchasing for self and home. Yes, not sure what that means, but purchasing for self and home. Home kind of the same, I think, but it is purchasing for self and home. And yeah, where does self take it? They take it home, right? And then above all flowers has great stats, so a compliment to you, Thomas, as well. I do want to give a couple updates. We are excited that next week, or actually the 30th of April, we will have Deborah Zolek, the 2021 Marketer of the Year from IFPA and the Director of Floral Programs from IFPA and the past buyer for Walmart, joining us. And she will be sharing something that's close to her heart, is how to work with your vendors as a buyer and vice versa, how to work with your customers as a vendor, I guess, as well in difficult times, be it economic, be it COVID, is sharing tips on how you can work together and collaborate closely with your vendor and or your customers to help grow in difficult times and either survive as well. Another great thing is the Bloom Show, Above All Flowers, New Bloom Solutions, mainly New Bloom Solutions, will be at Flory Expo. So we have done a partnership with them, and we have a registration code of Bloom2 as free registration. Again, some of our vendors will be there. I will be there with a video crew as well. So catch us if you're there, and keep an eye on those videos that we post here at the Bloom Show. But we will certainly be there, and we have a registration code of Bloom2 for any florists that are interested in learning more about the industry, wholesalers that are interested in learning more, mass market buyers as well. It's beautiful Fort Lauderdale, so you can take a quick trip to Miami, quick trip to Fort Lauderdale and Miami, but a quick trip if you're in Georgia or what have you. It's a one-day trip. You can spend 2 days there and really connect with the floral industry. They have some great boot camps. We also have a code for that. Reach out to us or put on the comments and we could give you that code as well. I think that's New Bloom. I think that's the code, but not sure. But Bloom2 will give you a free registration for Flory Expo. So we hope to see you there. Again, true big. Oh, another comment. Let's see. Above All Flowers says yes. So yeah, purchasing for self is purchasing for home. Thank you again for everybody joining. Appreciate you hanging out and hanging tough, and hope to see you next time. Take care.
The Bloom Show. Innovate, connect, and bloom.